we win over a new individual, a new leader, a new executive division every month, and that'll continue for the decade, I guess. From 2022 to 2030, I think that's how long it takes for a lot of these major financial institutions to rewire their thinking and their plumbing and their risk controls. By the way, we could complain about that or we could revel in it. The good fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin and you would lose, the next 20x.
Saylor thinks Bitcoin is going to hit $300 million in the next 10 years. The CEO of MicroStrategy says all earlier adopters of Bitcoin will be heavily rewarded in the future. As countries and businesses start to adopt Bitcoin, he sees the price skyrocketing and people who don't adopt cryptocurrency will just be left behind. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video and please like and subscribe. Thank you.
Institutional adoption and the likelihood that the institution and the establishment embrace this has never been clearer than it is today. Let's say it's going to be a 36-month, 24-month, 36-month, 48-month delay before banks catch up, but smaller banks are offering Bitcoin services. The larger banks, not yet, but Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, there are parts of those banks that are very reactionary and they push back. And on the other hand, another part of Morgan Stanley ends up owning $500 million worth of my stock, right? At the same time that the part of Morgan Stanley doesn't want anybody to buy your fund. And so these are, these are not monolithic conglomerates, right? These tend to be massive organizations with 100 different divisions, each of them making independent decisions. And you got to figure month by month, we win over a new individual, a new leader, a new executive division every month, and that'll continue for the decade, I guess. From 2022 to 2030, I think that's how long it takes for a lot of these major financial institutions to rewire their thinking and their plumbing and their risk controls. And what about? By the way, we could complain about that or we could revel in it. The good fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin and you would lose, the next 20x opportunity for you. So you almost don't want them to figure it out too fast, because otherwise you're the stupid money. I'd rather be the smart money and wait for the stupid money to learn over the course of 5 to 10 years, because we need someone to be buying this stuff when it hits $5 million a coin, Anthony. I think the sovereign wealth funds will come first. I mean, the first adoption will be any sovereign wealth fund like, UAE or Saudi Arabia or Norway or Switzerland that would hold big tech stocks. If you would hold $10 billion worth of Apple or Google or Facebook or Amazon, I think some of those will roll into Bitcoin because it's just another tech investment for them, and it's totally within their mandate. I think that some countries are being forced to consider other payment options. I mean, like the Russians are being forced. If you get kicked off of SWIFT, that drives and catalyzes something. And then I think it'll be a while, but we're really waiting for a small, mid-sized company that has its own currency to print its currency and buy Bitcoin. I don't think it's a this year thing or a next year thing, but at some point somebody will figure it out. If you're selling $50 billion worth of commodities or exports every year, and you're using the dollar as your treasury reserve asset, you're propping up $100 trillion currency that's inflating at 10, 15, 20% a year. So that's just shipping. That's in essence shipping all of your treasury to the dollar over the course of a decade. If you switch that and you started buying CNY, you'd be propping up the Chinese currency. Instead of propping up $100 trillion currency, you'd be propping up a $20 or $30 trillion currency, and that's to the benefit of the Chinese. If you switch to gold, you would be propping up a $12 trillion currency, and if you switch to Bitcoin, you would be propping up a less than $1 trillion currency. So If people were rational, I don't think they are, by the way. Luckily for us, 98% of them aren't, because you couldn't be in the top 2% if everybody else was as smart or smarter than you, could you? Right? So I guess they're not really totally rational, but if you were rational, the obvious thing to do if you're an export country is you start exporting in Bitcoin, and then you sweep your cash flows into Bitcoin, and then you probably make like 500 billion or $1 trillion because you did that. If you're the first mover, who will do that? Well, I mean, why wouldn't you do that, by the way? Why hasn't Apple bought $20 billion of Bitcoin and made $100 billion overnight yet? The answer is they're afraid, and they have political constraints. They're afraid of their shareholders. The accounting makes it ugly. So, you wonder, why don't they just bend over and make $1 trillion? Remember when I tweeted to Elon, I said, I didn't say buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I said buy 10 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then issue $10 billion of converts and buy 10 billion more, and you make 100 billion, and then all the S&P follows you and you make $1 trillion. Well, he didn't quite do that, right? I mean, he did a little. I'm okay with the $1.5 billion, but the point is, why doesn't someone do a $25 billion buy at Google? And the answer is because of politics and institutional inertia. And, some people don't want the trillion. Okay, so why doesn't a government do it? Politics, institutional inertia. When will they do it? Well, that this is the butterfly effect, right, guys? It's like, how do you predict when someone gets whacked on the side of the head and knocked out of their comfort zone and decides to go and bend over and pick up the $1 trillion? I don't know. Right?
What do you think of Saylor's prediction? Please let me know what you think below in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.